Hey everyone, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Justin, and before I get started, quick shout out to the Toronto Argonauts, your 2022 Grey Cup champions. What an awesome game, a fantastic finish. I hope some of you were able to watch it because there's some really quality football here in Toronto that not a lot of people give enough credit to or even give a chance to watch. So I hope some of you got the opportunity to watch that game. Again, it was just a wild finish, but today, we're hopping on and talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, I hate that there's probably this perception because I made 3 straight videos after the Leafs were just blowing up and had some terrible, terrible hockey. And then I don't go making a video after that maybe there's this perception that I'm just here to complain about the Leafs or take advantage when they lose and they're playing bad. It's just, the reality is there hasn't been much news to talk about, nothing that's really provoked me to make a video. But lately, I mean, they've been sputtering along. They've been picking up their play a little bit, clearly playing much better than they were back when I was making those 3 rants in a row. But they are still at only, I think, 500 on the dot, if you were to consider the overtime losses as just losses, which you absolutely should. I mean, they lost the game. So sitting at 500, it's not where we want to be. It's far below the expectations for this team. And so I wanted to hop on and just address some of my concerns. Now, last night, unfortunately, in the game against the New York Islanders, Morgan Rielly went down with an injury. He did not return to the game. I thought that it was probably more precautionary than anything because he did come out and play another shift. I thought that given the defensive issues that we've had so far this season with injuries, that maybe they just didn't want to risk him and wanted to get some imaging done just to make sure he's okay before he plays the next game. And unfortunately, I was wrong, and our bad luck continues this year with injuries. Morgan Rielly, today, placed on long-term injury reserve, which means he's missing at least 10 games or 24 days. And so now, we've already got the confirmation that Jake Muzzin is out until February at the very earliest. Perhaps he's done for the season, perhaps he's done for his career, but he's not coming back until February. And we had just heard shortly before this game that TJ Brodie, who's also been injured, is not joining the team on a 4-game road trip, that he won't be ready and he's progressing much slower than expected. So those are already 2 of your top 3 defensemen, and now the third, your best defenseman, goes down and is out for almost a month at the minimum. It sounds like it was an MCL sprain, not something to take lightly, not something that's a quick recovery. Where do we go from here? Well, that might be the biggest concern on Leafs fans' mind right now. It's obviously the defense. We've lost our top 3. But even with Jake Muzzin and TJ Brodie out up until this point, the Leafs' defense has progressively gotten better. Not better because the players are really good, but better because the whole team has just been really, really sound defensively. For whatever reason, just structurally, and that's part on the offense too, the way that they've been able to contribute on the defensive end of the puck. But they've been getting better game after game after game. And even in this game against the New York Islanders, it came down to a bad turnover by Erik Källgren. The Islanders capitalized, and in 3-on-3, the Leafs have just been absolute ass lately. But it's a crapshoot in 3-on-3. It could go either way, and we lose. But defensively, it was still a great performance. We limited their opportunities. We didn't give them much. They capitalized on some not even high-quality scoring chances in my mind. So where do we go from here? Well, I do still have some faith in the 6 defensemen that we've got in the lineup, so long as we can continue to play how we've been playing over this final, those last 5-game stretch, let's call it. Because, again, systematically, we've been very strong defensively. So if you were to plug in, let's say, Victor Mete in this top 6, I don't think that impacts us all too much. Obviously, it's a major hit to lose Morgan Rielly, as it was to lose Jake Muzzin and TJ Brodie. But we've got pieces that are still able to collectively, as a top 6, do okay. And you're not pulling someone up necessarily that hasn't had any NHL experience. That's where you would probably have your biggest concern. If the call-up was some guy that's just a Marley that's not NHL ready, not NHL prepared, and he's slotted in out of desperation, this is probably going to be a situation where we call up Victor Mete, who does have NHL experience. Again, it's not your ideal situation by any stretch, but we can get by, at least in the short term, off of this. There's also the potential that, there's been some rumors of the Leafs being interested in some defensemen, and this could speed up the process in building a trade, whether that be, I've heard some interest in Tyler Myers, I've heard interest in Luke Schenn, even in talks with Jakob Chychrun and Erik Karlsson. I don't think either of those are feasible deals just for the pure sake of the assets required to make that trade, because the Leafs, crazy enough, have an extreme amount of cap flexibility right now with the amount of players that they've had on LTIR since the very beginning of the season. They've built up a lot of room. Now, I'm not absolutely positive how this works, and someone, please, if you know, let me know down in the comments, because I know that the cap is cumulative. Every single day, there's like a daily sum of the players on your book, the players on your roster, what do they equate towards the salary cap, and you take that day by day until when you get to the, let's call it the trade deadline, you can look back and retroactively you've got your amount of cap space based on how much you saved day by day. Well, LTIR gives you not so much more cap space, but let's call it cap relief, where it's temporary, I guess, a bigger cap ceiling than you had. But then once those players come back, the cap goes back down. So is that LTIR cumulative? I don't know. If it is, by the time the trade deadline comes around, between having Samsonov, Brody, Muzzin, Murray, there's probably 10 other guys that I can't even think of right now that have been on LTIR. That kind of cap space provides so much flexibility. And if we are in a situation where Jake Muzzin is done for the season or his career, that is $5.6 million that we've got available. So we could theoretically actually afford Jakob Chychrun, who's on actually a very fair contract number as far as AAV. I think he's only $4.5 million, but you could even get someone like Erik Karlsson at, what is he, $11.5 million. Not the solution I want. I would not speed up the process in a trade like that. I don't really want Karlsson on our team for 4 more years with the history that he's had of his regression over the last few years. But perhaps this does speed up, Kyle Dubas's interest in making a trade sooner rather than later, so that we can get by the next little bit of a stretch without that much of a concern with our back end. Regardless, I do think we'll be okay. The Leafs should have a good enough team that even with these injuries happen to every single team, even with these injuries, that they can get by at least at, 500 or a little bit over. I can't see this team just all of a sudden not being able to win a game because Morgan Rielly's now out. And TJ Brody could come back in, let's say, 4 games. So it could be better than we think. That's where I think Leafs Nation's mind is at. They're thinking about the defense and how screwed we are. For me, there is one glaring issue with this team that I haven't seen anybody talk about. I've been listening to podcasts, I've been watching videos, I've been reading articles. Nobody's talking about how bad the Leafs' depth scoring is. Everybody's talking about 5-on-5 production and how that's been down. And yes, that has been down for the top 6 as well, the big 4 guys. But I've been thrilled with their production. I mean, William Nylander, John Tavares, both at 10 goals. Auston Matthews is somehow only at 8, and that's only going to go up, and that's still good production. Mitch Marner's on a 13-game point streak. And outside of that, the Leafs can't buy a goal, and it is a glaring issue that needs to be fixed. I don't know about you guys. I've heard this talked about at least, but you throw any single NHL quality player, whether it's a 4th liner or not, on a line with Matthews or John Tavares or William Nylander or Mitch Marner, they're bound to get points. So the fact that Alex Kerfoot cannot produce any sort of offense whatsoever when he's on a line with whether that be Matthews and Nylander or Tavares and Marner is just mind-blowing and shocking to me. And that's in the top 6. That would be inclusive of considering the top 6 production, because that's on your top 2 lines. But still, he's incapable of doing it. I'm convinced that if you put me in, I can't skate. I can barely skate. I'll stand in front of the net, it'll hit off of me, or I just give it to Mitch Marner in my own zone, he'll get a point. And somehow Alex Kerfoot has not been able to produce. But then you look at the bottom 6, or even the defense, which is like that next step down. You don't need your defense to be contributing goals, but there's been no offensive production whatsoever. Right now, the Leafs' bottom 6 or depth scoring is contributing probably 1 goal every 5 games. Completely unacceptable. You look at the New Jersey Devils, who are on a 13-game streak, 13-game win streak. They were showing the stats all night when the Leafs were playing them. Their top scorers are on all 4 lines. Their 4 best scorers are on 4 separate lines. That's unheard of compared to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who cannot buy a goal with their bottom 6. Calle Jarnkrok has been contributing once in a while. David Kampf contributed a little bit early on in the season, but that's died off because David Kampf isn't a goal scorer. He had 2 goals, I think, in the entire season when he was in Chicago before he came to Toronto. Pierre Engvall looks absolutely lost. I mean, I've always disliked him as a player on the Leafs. Last year, he was really good and contributed, I think, 20 goals, got a pay raise, and now forgets how to play hockey, does not know what he's doing. He will contribute a goal once in a while, but it's been non-existent this year. Dennis Mulligan is a player that I would classify as having offensive skill and capable of scoring your bottom 6, but he's on the 4th line and playing on a line with 2 very defensive-minded players, including Zach Aston Reese, who, if you're looking at him to contribute goals, you clearly don't know what kind of player you have there. Who else is in the bottom 6? I'm just blanking right now, but I mean, you've got a clear answer, I think, in Nick Robertson just sitting in the press box. But I'd like to see if Nick Robertson's in the lineup. I would rather him be in the top 6 and demote someone else. But how is this not being talked about? The Leafs 5-on-5 numbers have taken a direct hit. When you only have 2 lines that can produce, all the opposing team has to do is shut down 2 lines. It's the most simple, easiest strategy that you could possibly think of if you're an opposing team. Shut down 2 lines and you win the game, because at the very most, you're getting 1 goal from any player that's not in the top 6. That's all 6 of your defensemen and all 6 of your 3rd and 4th line. You're getting, if you're lucky, 1 goal. And that's not 1 goal a night. That's like 1 goal every 5 games. It's a complete disaster in my mind. And that is what needs to be addressed. The defense, they'll get healthy again. We will get TJ Brodie back. We will get Morgan Rielly back. But this is an issue that I see for this team for the long run. If the Leafs make it to the playoffs, all they have to do, the opposing team, is shut down 2 lines. And I get that that's a difficult thing when you're talking about very, very potent offense with Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares. But look at the Montreal series. Matthews and Marner contributed 1 goal. Tavares was out. Nylander was great. But it wasn't good enough because we didn't have any sort of depth scoring. Look at Game 7 last year. Who scored the 2 goals for the Tampa Bay Lightning? Nick Paul. Who scored the only goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Morgan Rielly. But there wasn't enough depth scoring, whereas in Tampa, they did. And Nick Paul right now, I think, has 8 goals. He's got equal amount of goals as Auston Matthews, and he's probably playing on the 3rd line in Tampa. It's an issue. It's a big, big issue. To be honest, I've had enough with Alex Kerfoot on the Leafs. Like, for $3.5 million, for him to be as invisible and incapable as he is in playing in the top 6, I mean, you could bump him down to the 3rd line, which is where I would say he fits best. But that's not going to help the 3rd line score at all. If he's not capable of scoring with Tavares and Marner, then he's not capable of scoring in the bottom 6. And there really isn't anybody there that can get you out of that funk. Pontus Holmberg, are you looking at him? He's played, 4 NHL games? He doesn't have a single goal in his NHL career. And he's playing on a line with Calle Jarnkrok, who's, I mean, one of those guys that you would look at being capable of putting the puck in the net. But it's just not a recipe for success. There needs to be a trade. There needs to be something that happens here because, again, at the end of the day, even if this Leafs team picks it up, this is an issue that I see coming up in the playoffs because it's been an issue for the last 6 years in a row. 6 years in a row where the Leafs have lost in the first round of the playoffs, but it wasn't defensive issues. Everybody keeps looking at the defense. Everybody keeps looking at the goaltending. Everybody was scared for our tandem coming into the season, saying, Murray and Samsonov, what are we going to do? They've been fantastic. Much better than anybody could have predicted. And yet the Leafs are still only at 500. Why is that? Why is that? If people are concerned about the goaltending, but they're actually doing well, what is the issue? And I've been preaching this year after year after year after year. The Leafs don't get depth scoring. We barely got by last year with Auston Matthews putting up 60 goals, the most in franchise history, the only player in the entire league to get 60 goals last year, and the Leafs still couldn't score enough to get them out of their problems. Why? Depth scoring. We need more of it. Put Nick Robertson in this lineup. Put him in the top 6, I would like to see that. But even if it's on the 3rd line, I'd like to see Robertson and Mulligan on a line together. Even if you put, Alex Kerfoot as center on that line, Pontus Holmberg even. You could put Calle Jarnkrok as center. But that at least poses 2 scoring threats on the wing on a 3rd line. Another line that the opposing team needs to think about and play a little bit more defensive against. But right now, we don't have a threat. We don't have a threat. And we need to make a change. We've been preaching it for so long. Alex Kerfoot, it's not working here anymore, my man. I really do respect Alex Kerfoot. I love his character. I love him off of the ice, but on the ice, he just has not gotten it done. And same thing with Pierre Engvall. I watch his interviews and I really want to like the guy because he seems like such a likable guy. But then on the ice, he's just clueless. Clueless. Get them out of your roster and replace them with people that can put the puck in the net. It's a serious issue. And if you don't believe me, I encourage, please, everyone watching this, go into NHL.com, take a look at the last 10 Leafs games, and count how many goals were not scored by the top 6. Again, that's inclusive of the 6 defensemen and the 6 players on the bottom 6. There just isn't enough. And then look at some of the best teams in the league right now, and look at their numbers. They get support. I'm not trying to make it seem like the sky is falling here. And I hate that, again, there's probably this perception that I'm only here to shit on the Leafs. I want the Leafs to succeed, and that's where I'm coming from here. There's room and opportunity to address this and fix it before crunch time. We're very early in the season still, probably only 20 games in. We need to address it. And that's my perspective on this team right now. Again, I'm not happy with the defensive situation. I think that the 3 that are out are significant. I think that the 6 that are in right now are not good enough in the long run. But again, that's something that will fix itself over time as people get healthy. The bottom 6, the depth scoring not being there, has been a consistent issue for the last 6 years, and it will continue to be a consistent issue until we address it. So that's my thoughts, and we're going to get exposed and watch what happens against New Jersey tomorrow. What are your thoughts? I would love to hear it. Please comment down below. I want to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for clicking on this video and watching this, and I'll see you in the next one.